In 1974, a man ran into a local bar screaming. He was shouting that his mum, dad, 2 brothers and 2 sisters had been murdered. A group accompanied him as they ran back to the scene. What they found was horrific. The entire DeFeo family was shot to death in their beds. So what on earth had happened to Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s family? They were apparently very kind and religious. Financially, they were comfortable due to the family's car dealership. However, behind closed doors, Ronald Jr.'s dad, Ronald Sr., was violent. He would take his anger out on the family, and in particular, Ronald Jr. It wasn't too long before Ronald Jr. started fighting back. He would also lash out at classmates at school. Due to this and the fact that he started using heavy substances, he was kicked out of school. He would start regularly getting drunk and into fights. On one occasion, he attacked his dad with a shotgun when his parents were arguing. Then, in 1974, he hatched a plan to steal money from the car dealership. He intended to stage a robbery and then keep the money for himself. However, his plan failed and his dad ended up confronting him about this. They got into an argument and Ronald Jr. threatened to kill him. In the early hours of the 13th of November, Ronald Jr. fatally shot all of his family members. This was including his 9-year-old brother. He then showered, hid evidence in a pillowcase and went to work. At work that day, he staged calling his family members. He told his colleagues of his concern that they weren't answering the phone. Later that day, he ran to the bar to fake his distress at what he'd found. At first, he tipped off police about a potential hitman that could have done this, but his story wasn't adding up. Shortly after, he did admit the killings, but stated that voices in his head told him to do it. When another family moved into the house a year later, they stated that the house was haunted by evil spirits. It became known as the Amityville Horror House and inspired books and films. Ronald Jr. spent the rest of his life in prison until 2021, where he died aged 69.
It's a moment in court that shocked everyone. The sister of a slain 13-year-old cheerleader dropping heart-shaped stones into a glass. One after another, the glass fills up until she reaches the number 114.
This jar now holds 114 stones, one for each of the 114 stab wounds that my sister had to endure.
Tristan Bailey, last seen wearing her cheerleader uniform, went missing on Mother's Day 2 years ago in Jacksonville, Florida. This surveillance video shows her at 1:15 a.m. She's walking with a 14-year-old classmate, Aiden Fucci. When police picked up Fucci for questioning, he posted this truly disturbing photo of himself in the back of a police car, giving the V sign with the caption, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" He also posted a Snapchat video.
Having fun in a backyard.
During his police interrogation, Fucci's parents scolded him for posting on social media.
The Snapchat that you did was not very smart.
Not a Snapchat that you did. It's all over. You're all over the internet and everywhere.
Tristan's body was discovered in a secluded wooded area. She had been stabbed 114 times. Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing, each of Tristan's siblings and her parents all dropped stones into the jar.
So impactful, it just absolutely stopped everybody. Complete quiet in court.
Fucci presented this handwritten apology. "I'm sorry for all the pain I caused the Bailey family. I know my apology will not fix anything or bring her back." That didn't sway the judge, who sentenced Fucci to the maximum penalty allowable under Florida law.
There is only one appropriate sentence in this case. I sentence you to life in prison.
Episode 4. Bethany Martin, otherwise known as 23 Bethany 23. Creator class type unknown. Specialty being like Totally Stoked on Life. Claim to fame the following series of events. Well, back in July of 2021, Bethany, along with an unknown friend, had been walking home from a gas station at around 7:30 a.m. It was at this point they spotted deceased Marcus Adams hanging from a concrete structure in a drainage ditch. Now, rather than immediately calling the police, they would proceed to film Marcus from close up and post it on Snapchat, where Bethany can clearly be seen stealing the man's necklace. The girls then placed a call to an unknown male who would immediately notify the police as to Marcus's location. But things don't end here. Later on that same day, they would post a series of TikToks, and one of them went a little something like this. Meanwhile, that Snapchat had gone absolutely viral, so much so Marcus's family ended up seeing it. It was at this time the two girls were placed under arrest. Bethany has since been charged with felony theft from a corpse. That TikTokers Who Did Terrible Things, Episode 10. Nicola Priest, otherwise known as Nikki P 210. Creator class type, unknown. Specialty, not a single thing. Claim to fame, evil beyond belief. Now before we begin, there is a reason I have chosen this account to be the 10th installment of this series. That is, not a single thing so far on this list even compares to what this individual did. Well, prior to August of 2020, only a few thousand people even knew Nicola's account existed. Reason being, she just posted a bunch of randomized content, most of which would hardly resonate with anyone whatsoever. And here it is. On August 8th of that year, Nikki is trying to spend some alone time with her then boyfriend, Calum Redfern. However, her daughter Kaylee is not ready to go to bed yet, and thus keeps interrupting them while they're trying to get in the mood. It was at this point Nikki got up and attacked Kaylee with such ferocity. Paramedics would say it was the equivalent of being hit by a car going 40 miles an hour. I mean, the details of the report are so savage and graphic, we simply cannot mention them on this platform. What we can tell you is for the next several hours, Kaylee would lay there going in and out of consciousness, becoming more and more ill as the night went on. It wasn't until the next day, on August 9th, Nikki would call 999. At this point, Kaylee had been deceased for around 3 hours. Nikki would be sentenced to 15 years for ending the life of her very own daughter. Calum is serving 14, making her number 10 on our list.
Take my hand and stay with me, my dear. I think you broke my heart again. She's getting on my nerves. You don't love her.
Good night, Wybie.
Stop lying with those words. She's getting on my nerves. You don't love her.
Good night, Wybie.
Stop lying with those words.
When I was bullied for being fat, did anyone apologize to me? No, because nobody cares about bullying. Not unless you're pretty or rich or special, but if you're fat or ugly or just uncool, you just let them suffer. For years, just like I did.
I don't wanna talk right now. Don't know where you are right now. I just wanna watch TV. Did you see me on TV? I'll stay in the pool and drown. I'll try not to starve myself, so I don't have to watch you leave just because you made it.
It's time for Cookies and Crime. This is the case of the Hello Kitty murder. The full case is up on my YouTube. In May of 1999, a 14-year-old girl told police she was being haunted by the ghost of a woman. They, of course, didn't believe her, believing it was nothing but a dream or teenage nonsense. But when she told them that it was the ghost of a woman that she helped murder, they listened. They followed the girl back to a flat in a rundown part of the city in Hong Kong. What they discovered was horrifying. Born in 1975, Fan Man-yi was abandoned by her family as a child, resulting in her being raised in an all-girls orphanage. orphanage. When she turned 15, she was told to leave the orphanage because they had an age restriction. Having nowhere to go, she became homeless and addicted to drugs. She was forced into being a lady of the night until the age of 21 when she began working at a nightclub. She eventually married one of her clients in 1996. Fan's husband was described as abusive, and neighbors would report being woken up by sounds of the couple's fights and the child screaming and crying from their apartment. After having a son, she decided to turn her life around in order to protect him and provide a safer life. She left her husband and, due to the sacrifices, had a much lower income and struggled to support herself and her family. While working at the nightclub, Fan met Chan Men-lok, a 34-year-old triad member who had previous charges for stealing and R. In early 1999, Fan stole Chan's wallet, which contained about 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, or roughly $500 US. Chan caught her and demanded Fan to return the money in addition to a fee of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. Although Fan immediately returned the stolen money, she needed more time to secure the additional fee. On March 17, 1999, Fan was abducted by 3 men and 1 girl. It was Chan himself, his grooming victim Lau Ming-fong, who was only 14, and 2 other henchmen. They took her to an apartment where they imprisoned her for a month. During her imprisonment, she was demeaningly tortured. She was beaten with metal bars, sometimes while being strung up and used as a punching bag. Spices were rubbed into her wounds, and she was forced to smile and say she enjoyed the beatings. If she refused, they subjected her to even harsher torture. I can't even say some of the other things that they did to her. This treatment eventually led to traumatic shock and ultimately death. After finding her dead, her captors took her apart and boiled the remains. Her skull was sewn inside of a Hello Kitty doll, while the rest of the body was discarded. Lau, the 14-year-old grooming victim that took part in this torture, truly believed that the ghost of Fan was haunting her for what she did, and that's when she went to the police. After a 6-week trial on December 7, 2000, the 3 men were convicted of manslaughter, while Lau testified at the trial in exchange for immunity. They are currently serving their life sentences in Stanley Prison.
You called her a hoe because she said nobody, you're letting on your fragile masculinity show. I mean, oh my, she's just not into you, doesn't matter.
This video will make you terrified of your neighbours. What this man did to his neighbour is just sickening. Miguel Gonzalez and Laura Miller both lived in the same building in North Carolina and often argued with each other. The pair really didn't get on, and 3 days before murdering her, Miguel allegedly showed up on her doorstep with a baseball bat. A witness reported he was asking Laura to open the door or else he was going to kill her. 3 days later, Miguel entered the 35-year-old's apartment and committed the most brutal attack on her. He's believed to have wrapped a wire around her neck, tied her ankles together, and slashed her body in a murderous rage. He was arrested, as you can see, with blood and scratches all over his face. Laura's body was found so slashed up she was unrecognizable. The 36-year-old had restrained her by her feet, burned both of her inner thighs, and he even cut off her tongue, which was found in a different room. Before fleeing in the victim's car, Miguel poured salt all around her body and placed wooden crosses all around her. Heartbreakingly, it was Laura's brother that had to find this scene and call the police. Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about your neighbour? Nate Kibbe always seemed a little bit odd to his neighbours. He lived in a trailer in New Hampshire and always seemed very private. Little did locals know that this was because he was hiding a hideous secret. During his school years, he was considered aggressive and cruel. As an adult, his behaviour got worse. He got in trouble for grabbing a 16-year-old off a school bus and also providing false information while trying to buy a weapon. He was argumentative, and locals say that he was someone you would just try and avoid. In 2014, he was arrested after an incident where he followed a woman home and pushed her to the ground. Neighbours would often hear him shouting at his long-term girlfriend, Angel. In October 2013, 14-year-old schoolgirl Abby Hernandez disappeared just a few days before her 15th birthday. She'd been walking home from school and seemingly vanished. Nate had stopped by the side of her and offered her a lift. She actually got in the car due to having blisters on her feet, and he then threatened her with a gun. He put a jacket round her head, broke her phone, and tasered her when she tried to get free. When back at his home, he tied her up, taped over her eyes, and forced her into a motorbike helmet before SAing her. For 9 agonizing months, she was held hostage. He put a shock collar around her neck and kept her in a shipping container. Now, Abby is a very bright girl, so she tried to gain his trust. She said she went along with everything that he asked. This started working, and eventually he gave her a little bit of freedom. He allowed her to read a book, and she noticed inside was his name. In July 2014, Nate discovered that he was potentially in trouble with the police. He'd paid an S worker with fake money, and she had reported him. Anxious that police were going to raid his property, he let Abby go under the condition that she didn't tell anyone. After the 9-month ordeal, she was finally free to walk home. She obviously told police straight away what had happened. They raided his trailer and arrested him. He's serving a sentence of 45 to 90 years, and Abby has actually forgiven him. She helped with the creation of a film about her kidnapping called Girl in the Shed. Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind, and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case. This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Telma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Haley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Telma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Telma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Telma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Haley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Telma's husband, Kevin, wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Haley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Haley is currently awaiting trial.
Would you believe me if I told you that this sweet, innocent-looking old lady was actually one of the most calculated serial killers of all time? Well, this is Dorothea Puente, and she owned a care home for vulnerable people. She said that it was her passion in life to care for people. But when people at Dorothea's care home started going missing out of nowhere, social services got involved and they realised that not everything was as it seemed with this business. There was evidence that Dorothea had been cashing in her residents' pension checks, social security checks, into her own bank and only giving them a fraction of their own money. But things only went from bad to worse when one of the residents reported seeing Dorothea digging holes in the yard, and that paired with people going missing, police knew they had to investigate. So they took their shovels to the care home and they started digging, and that was when they found pieces of cloth and pieces of what seemed to be leather, and then bones. As they dug deeper, police ended up recovering 7 corpses from the garden of the care home. And that wasn't all. Even inside the house, there were suspicious things like blood stains in the carpet. Of course, police wanted to speak with Dorothea immediately, so they rushed to the hotel she said she'd be at, but she was gone. She'd fled, and now they had no idea where to find this serial killer. And you can find out how the story ends in the first episode of Worst Roommate Ever on Netflix.
Do this and put it on your chin. Is this your chin, Mama? Do this and put it on your chin.
They were murdered in their own home by a man they trusted. Mother and daughter strangled, suffocated and set on fire by the family handyman Shabazz Khan. Dr. Saman Mir Sachavi and her 14-year-old daughter Vian Mangrio lived in Reedley in Lancashire. CCTV captures Khan walking towards their home the day he killed them. When Vian comes home from school, her mum is already dead. And when Khan leaves at around 10 p.m, so is she. It's believed they had both been drugged and then murdered. Khan then tried to cover his tracks by starting a fire in the kitchen and scrawling graffiti on the walls. It reads, "This is a COVID house. My mum is evil."
Breaking news. Body of missing South Texas deputy constable found. Suspect charged with murder. Evelyn Guardado, 24, was reported missing to authorities on February 1st, after she left work at the Eagle Pass Detention Center on January 31st. Guardado's body was found at 9:36 a.m. February 7th near the border of a ranch in Quemado.
Aquí está la joven Evelyn Guardado, sus familiares.
The suspect was arrested in Medina County and has been charged with first-degree murder and jail without bond. According to police, there is no word on what kind of relationship the two had.
After transgender and transracial, we got transable. Yeah, this one's really messed up. Physically healthy people who feel they should have been born disabled. A man in Great Britain cut off his arm because he felt like an amputee. A woman in North Carolina poured drain cleaner in her eyes because she felt blind. Transgender, transracial, transable. Guess what's next? A grown man posting an ad on Craigslist wanting a nanny because he identifies as a baby. You can't make this stuff up. Ridiculous? Perhaps, but who's to say anymore if that's how he feels? If a man can be a woman because he feels like one, if a white person can be a black person because she feels like one, if a healthy person can mutilate herself because she feels disabled, if a grown man can be a baby because he feels infantile, where does